Did you know that the iconic Video Killed the Radio Star was the very first music video ever aired on MTV? Discover why this 70s band's groundbreaking hit still resonates today and what else they were up to. 20. Captain and Tennille.
Love will keep us together. Think of me, babe.
Do you remember Muskrat Love by Captain and Tennille? It was so infamous that it turned into a nightmare for some. Did you know it was almost called Muskrats in the Dark? Muskrat Love was originally supposed to be titled Muskrat Candlelight, but Muskrats in the Dark sounds even more terrifying. They didn't even write the song. It's a cover of the song written by Willis Allen Ramsey. The Captain and Tennille were even invited to play the song at the White House when Queen Elizabeth II came to visit in 1976. Who approved that? Looking at you, Gerald Ford. Totally not a groovy move. They were everywhere. They even had their own TV show. Perhaps this band ticked people off because they were a little too overexposed. I mean, TV shows, White House visits, all for Muskrat Love? Seems a little over the top. The Captain and Tennille were a married couple who performed together. Sadly, in 2014, after 40 years of marriage, they divorced, and each muskrat went their separate ways. 19. Edison Lighthouse. Ever heard of Edison Lighthouse? They shine brightly with just one hit, and the rest, not so much. Their name was inspired by a 300-year-old lighthouse. Another English pop group active from 1969 to 1977. The name was inspired by the Eddystone Lighthouse, the world's first offshore lighthouse that was constructed more than 300 years ago, 14 miles off the coast of Plymouth. They were a one-hit wonder music group most well known for Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes. The lead singer, Tony Burrows, left the group after the hit was released, but he didn't own the rights to the band name, so it went on operating without him. Maybe the love might grow some more for this group. Stu and Dave still perform at gigs throughout Cornwall. Edison Lighthouse was really a one-hit wonder kind of band. The rest of their songs are mediocre at best. 18. The Buggles.
God, you know it's hard to keep the fighting clean.
Ever heard of the Buggles? They were the duo band behind the first music video ever aired on MTV. But did you know their name might have been inspired by bug-eyed glasses? The Buggles were a British new wave duo who were certainly unique. Trevor Horn, the vocalist and bassist, said that their name was inspired by his oversized glasses, which made him look bug-eyed, like a buggle. But it's also been said that they are the generic sort of Costco brand of the Beatles. Either way, the name is pretty. You may remember them for one specific reason. Their song, Video Killed the Radio Star, was the first music video that aired on MTV on August 1st, 1981. An appropriate song title because music videos soon took the world by storm. And maybe they really did kill the radio star. But the song didn't gain popularity quickly. They pitched it to several labels and were rejected by all of them. The group was eventually signed by Trevor Horn's girlfriend's label, Island Records. But the Buggles had to drastically change the song. Luckily, that all worked toward their benefit because their tune is now kind of synonymous with the launch of the pivotal MTV. You know, when they used to play music videos and not shows about promiscuous young people hooking up in New Jersey. Video Killed the Radio Star was a monster hit in many countries when it was initially released in 1979, but not in the United States. Until, of course, MTV made it so. And although I'll admit this song is not terrible, their other songs sound more like something an arcade game would crank out in the final boss level. 17. Genesis.
You know I love you, but I just can't take this. You know
Genesis has long been a lightning rod for music critics. Did you know that despite all the flack, they were once at the top of their game with groundbreaking hits? Many connoisseurs of classic rock think Genesis has had little more than several bad songs. A simple Google search shows several lists and blogs ranking the worst Genesis songs. The band changed sounds several times, and some people weren't really sure what exactly the band was trying to do. I guess people hate what they don't understand. All of the original band members were brilliant musicians of their own accord, most notably Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins. Originally they were known as progressive rock, but by the late 70s they moved away from this sound. Some music critics argue that the band peaked in the mid-80s actually. What are your thoughts? Do you like Genesis or not? 16. Bo Donaldson and the Heywoods. Bo Donaldson and the Heywoods hit Billy Don't Be a Hero might sound lighthearted, but it was supposed to be about the American Civil War. Instead, it became synonymous with the Vietnam War. Bo Donaldson and the Heywoods were a UK-based pop group famous for their song Billy Don't Be a Hero that was supposed to be about the American Civil War, but it was released in the 70s toward the end of the Vietnam War, so people will forever associate the song with the Vietnam War. Billy Don't Be a Hero was the band's only hit. Many think the whistling marching band section is cheesy and heavy-handed. Although the subject matter is dark, the song is pretty lighthearted emotionally. Almost makes war seem funny. The poor taste of the lyrics and the annoyingness of the whistling section make Bo Donaldson and the Heywoods one of those acts people love to hate. 15. Bad Company.
Feel like making love. Oh yeah.
Despite their promising start with Led Zeppelin's Swan Song, Bad Company's rock tunes often felt underwhelming compared to their iconic peers. What made their music so average? In the early 70s, every single great act had some element of the blues in their sound. From the blend of R&B with Jimi Hendrix to the bombastic sounds of Led Zeppelin, each band used their songs to tap into the pain inside their soul. After being signed to Led Zeppelin's Swan Song Records, it seemed as though Bad Company had all the makings of a great rock band, but some of their tunes left rockers underwhelmed. Sure, the band's musicians are certainly great players and have one of the best rock vocalists of all time in Paul Rodgers, but the actual songs were just the standard rock you could find anywhere else in the wild. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. However, when put next to bona fide superstars like Queen, Pink Floyd, and the mighty Zeppelin, Bad Company's straight-ahead form of rock music didn't seem to be pushing the genre forward, which was a bit disconcerting considering the band's lineup included former members of King Crimson and Free. Regardless of the more intellectual rock types, the band still had some phenomenal cuts in their prime, like their namesake track and Feel Like Making Love. Being pure rock is rarely a detriment to a rock band, but the formula behind these guys never seemed to sit well with the more outlandish types. 14. Aerosmith. Aerosmith's transition from hard rock pioneers to pop rockers has left many fans bewildered. What happened to the gritty edge that defined the early years? Most classic rock fans nowadays have fond memories of blasting out their favorite acts from their car stereos every summer. Though Aerosmith would have easily made any rocker's playlist back in the day, many fans are just shaking their heads wondering where everything went wrong for this band from Boston. At their start, Aerosmith was one of the powerful hard rock acts to emerge from the US. While their sound may have been a bit derivative of Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones, they had their own identity going for them with the boogie on Toys in the Attic. However, the more reprehensible parts of their career started once they made their comeback in the 90s. While the album Get a Grip was definitely fun, they weren't the dangerous band we had gotten to know before. Instead, these rough and tumble rockers had turned into a pop rock act who was trying to cash their checks and rake in the royalties. With Steven Tyler even having a stint as a judge on American Idol, most rock fans would sooner take an axe to a new Aerosmith record than actually play it. In this case, the problem is not the pop music they're playing, but the down and dirty rock that they aren't. 13. Rush.
I am the whisper tales of immortality.
Rush went from being music press punching bags to revered rock gods. How did this prog rock band overcome the harshest critics to become legends? Rush have been one of the go-tos for the hard rock geeks the world over since the 70s. With their complex prog epics and amazing musicianship, the band have more than earned their spot as certified rock gods with bands like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. You wouldn't have known that by hearing their first critics, though. Throughout the band's early period, they were torn to shreds by the bigwigs of the music press for their complicated sound and what they thought was a tedious form of rock music. When combing through the more offensive works of the critics, people tend to rag on Rush because of the high-end voice of Geddy Lee, which has been described as sounding like everything from a demon to a guinea pig screaming in agony. Even though everything is relative to taste, the dramatic shift in stature the band has gotten over the years proves that their critics didn't have the first clue as to what this band was about. Sure, their songs were a bit more complicated than most, but they never had to sacrifice a great hook in order to make their colossal hits. They may have been nerd rock, but all of the rancor fades away once you sit down and listen to the music. 12. Styx. Despite their innovative sound and complex compositions, Styx never seemed to get the critical acclaim they deserved. What kept them from rock stardom? Throughout the 70s, it seemed that another classic rock band would debut every other month. From the beginnings of punk music to the bombast of prog, there was no shortage of great material for rock fans to sink their teeth into. Compared to their rock peers, though, Styx never seemed to be given the time of day by most critics. On the surface, there doesn't seem to be anything too wrong with the band, with their lofty song structures sitting pretty comfortably between prog rock and arena rock. However, the real stumbling block comes in their more formulaic nature. Most of the time, the songs would be trade-offs between composers Dennis DeYoung, Tommy Shaw, and James Young. While Young and Shaw had a decent enough rock presence, DeYoung always gave off the impression of a music nerd who just stumbled into being a frontman, which made for some pretty milquetoast attempts at rock and roll bombast. Even when they moved away from their normal sound, DeYoung's vision of the band's synthetic direction showed them losing the attention of fans and critics alike. Though the band looks like they're in a better place nowadays, the memorable moments of their early days have been burnt into the minds of rock fans for all the wrong reasons. 11. Whitesnake. Whitesnake's flirtation with double entendre and their bluesy sound kept them in the shadows of rock giants. Did David Coverdale's band ever find their place in the limelight? Somewhere between Deep Purple and Guns N' Roses, there's Whitesnake. That begs the question, do you really want to be between Deep Purple and GNR? Before fronting Whitesnake, David Coverdale was in Deep Purple. That band was never going to be mistaken for intellectuals, but they weren't dumb. Whitesnake was dumb. They lead rock bands in the double entendre. Cheap and nasty, come and get it, give me all your love, hungry for love, ready and willing, slide it in, spit it out, and many more. Whitesnake wasn't exactly an overnight sensation. David Coverdale formed the band after leaving Deep Purple. He launched a brief solo career releasing 2 albums. As Louder notes, he then formed a band he initially called David Coverdale's Whitesnake, which he quickly and wisely shortened to just Whitesnake. The band released its first album, Trouble, in 1978. As reported by Music Aficionado, the band proceeded to release 5 more albums to modest success in the UK and Europe, and a distinct lack of success in the United States. The band's sound was initially out of step with what was happening in rock music at the time. It was a very bluesy, rough 1970s sound that simply wasn't in vogue in a world where punk rock and new wave were dominating the rock charts. 10. Kiss.
And tonight, I wanna lay it at your feet.
Kiss may have revolutionized rock performances with their outlandish stage shows, but their focus on theatrics over music left many feeling deceived. Did their flashy image overshadow their talent? The best rock bands are the ones that make you feel like there is no barrier between the musicians and the audience. Regardless of the more manufactured parts of the music business, many acts have proven themselves to be just as down to earth as the people in the crowd. On the other hand, if you only see your music as a marketing tool to profit off teenagers, you're gonna get a lot of hate thrown your way. Enter Kiss. I will go so far as to admit that Kiss at the start had a pretty great idea in mind for the rock collective, to make the best stage show ever seen. And ever since the band's first big break with Alive, Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons have become 2 of the most savvy businessmen who just happen to play guitars, with songs that veer on the wrong side of cringy. Even away from music, Simmons is known as one of the more insufferable rock stars out there, whose holier-than-thou attitude toward fans and colleagues has rubbed many people the wrong way. Songs like Detroit Rock City may still kick ass by today's standards, but the amazing moments this band has to offer tend to get overshadowed by their more egregious behavior. 9. King Harvest.
He said, "Man, that's when you gotta go on strike."
King Harvest's brief success with Dancing in the Moonlight didn't last, as their follow-up efforts failed to capture the same magic. What went wrong for this fleeting sensation? King Harvest's original 4 members, Dave "Doc" Robinson, vocals, bass, Ron Altbach, keyboards, Ed Tuleja, guitar, and Rod Novak, saxophone, initially formed in 1969 in Ithaca, New York. They'd break up 2 years later, but eventually reconvened in Paris later that same year. Dancing in the Moonlight followed in 1972, but it took a while to find an audience. King Harvest temporarily disbanded once more as the tune languished on the charts. Dancing in the Moonlight slowly began grabbing ears in America, and by 1973 it was a certified hit, reaching number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100. The group toured heavily around this time, but subsequent material never capitalized on their newfound popularity. King Harvest broke up for good in 1976. 8. Steely Dan. Steely Dan's sophisticated sound and meticulous production earned them a unique place in rock history. But did their jazz-influenced style alienate mainstream rock fans? All the great bands to come from rock's golden period had a way of grabbing you by the throat and luring you into their sonic madness. If you weren't able to get the people to dance or headbang from the word go, you were gently towing the line between being mellow or just plain boring. Even though these acts were more down-tempo, no other band got as much undeserved ignorance as Steely Dan. It might sound strange from a rocker's perspective, with much of the band's work sounding like the stuff that you'd hear on a second-rate yacht trip. On the contrary, the work that this band has done is some of the most experimental rock music ever made. The musical duo of Donald Fagen and Walter Becker masterminded some of the most brilliant performers from the jazz and fusion world to turn their tracks into musical marvels, while also pushing the boundaries of what modern music production could do. Sure, the songs may not have the same blast of energy as a harder rock track, but the real magic comes from this band's close attention to detail. It's pretty easy to put them in the dad rock category, but once you pick up an instrument, you'll realize how wrong you were for counting these guys out. 7. Kansas.
Don't you cry no more.
Kansas was a powerhouse of progressive rock, but their lack of emotional depth left some fans cold. Could their complex sound have been too mechanical for the rock scene? Even the most devout progressive rock fans listen to Kansas and say, gee, these guys are a little cold. Kansas can make a lot of sound. After all, half the population of the state of Kansas is in the band, but their music had little to no emotion. It's like Jethro Tull and Yes had a baby, but instead of a baby, it was a music-playing robot. By the way, the state has a population of just under 3 million. The band has 7 members. Some people think of Kansas in terms of flat prairies, farms, tornadoes, Dorothy and the Wizard, Red State, and Bible Belt. But that's not the Kansas that stormed into the rock and roll landscape 35 years ago. This was a progressive rock band with a complex sound and intriguing lyrics. Its 2 biggest hits, Dust in the Wind and Carry On My Wayward Son, are classics that still get tremendous airplay and undoubtedly will ring through the Cerritos Center for the Performing Arts at the group's concert Wednesday night. What few remember is that Kansas was also one of the most hated bands of the 70s. Not by those who bought their records in the millions and crowded into arenas for sold-out shows, but by the rock establishment. The establishment in those days consisted of reviewers and critics at Rolling Stone, other magazines, and many newspapers. Many of them came to the conclusion that progressive rock was not authentic and often wrote vicious attacks on such bands as Kansas, Styx, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. It was us against the world, is how Rich Williams, the Kansas guitarist, put it in a phone interview recently. It was a uniting factor. Now I just don't care, Williams said. It doesn't hurt anymore. 34 years later, we're busier than we've ever been. Even though the band is still around and most of its critics are dust in the wind, it's evident the attacks are still painful memories. 6. REO Speedwagon.
No, I know all about those men.
REO Speedwagon's penchant for generic rock and Kevin Cronin's nasally voice have earned them a mixed reputation. Did their uninspired hits hinder their lasting appeal? REO Speedwagon is the favored band among people who buy music at gas stations. Their hits, Keep On Loving You and Can't Fight This Feeling, are marginal at best. What lands them on our list is their synergy of run-of-the-mill songwriting and Kevin Cronin's irritating nasally vocals. They named one of their albums The Earth, A Small Man, His Dog, and a Chicken. REO Speedwagon, originally stylized as REO Speedwagon or simply REO, is an American rock band from Champaign, Illinois. Formed in 1967, the band cultivated a following during the 1970s and achieved significant commercial success throughout the 1980s. Their best-selling album, High Infidelity, 1980, contained 4 US top 40 hits and sold more than 10 million copies. REO Speedwagon has sold more than 40 million records and charted 13 top 40 hits, including the number ones Keep On Loving You and Can't Fight This Feeling. By the late 1980s, the band's popularity was starting to decline. Gratzer left in September 1988 after he decided to retire from music to open a restaurant. In early 1989, Richrath left the band after tensions between him and Cronin boiled over. On January 4th, 2023, the band announced that its sole remaining original member, Neil Doughty, would retire from touring with the band after 55 years. 5. Looking Glass. Looking Glass had their moment with Brandy, You're a Fine Girl, but they struggled to maintain that success. Despite their early promise, the band faded into obscurity. Looking Glass was formed at Rutgers University in 1969, co-founded by guitarist-vocalist Elliot Lurie and pianist Larry Gonski. Drummer Jeff Grob and bassist Peter Swevel later joined, rounding out the classic lineup. Looking Glass's self-titled 1972 debut album featured the song Brandy, You're a Fine Girl, a breezy, soft rock track that told the story of a bartender whose eyes could steal a sailor from the sea. The song hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in August 1972, but Looking Glass was never again able to reach such lofty heights. The closest they came was with the 1973 single Jimmy Loves Mary Ann, which petered out at number 33. The group went through lineup fluctuation and name changes in 1974 before eventually disbanding in 1985. 4. Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Emerson, Lake and Palmer's grandiose style made them a target for punk fans, but they remain a notable figure in prog rock. Their grand ambitions often overshadowed their actual impact. Emerson, Lake and Palmer is a household name. They've built their entire reputation on one line. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. Even ELP fans can't name the song that line comes from. Emerson, Lake and Palmer are quite possibly the world's most reviled band. Now, they were extremely popular in the early 70s among those who took themselves seriously, especially college students, and even today they maintain a sizable cult following, so it would be unfair to say that absolutely nobody likes them. Regardless, however, this is a perfectly legitimate statement on the general level. Fans of punk have always detested them as they would any prog band, but this extended far beyond normal levels of loathing. As an example, one of the staples of the late 70s Sex Pistols shows was to burn life-size statues of Keith Emerson in effigy. Or so the legend goes, and I really hope it's true because it's a hilarious legend. 3. Steelers Wheel. Steelers Wheel had a brief moment in the spotlight with Stuck in the Middle with You, but their inconsistent lineup and subsequent lack of hits led to their downfall. The Steelers Wheel lineup was in constant flux from day one. Joe Egan and Jerry Rafferty formed the Scottish folk rock band, then released a self-titled debut album in November 1972. Stuck in the Middle with You reached the top 10, but Rafferty soon left. He later returned, but Steelers Wheel couldn't replicate their breakout singles' commercial appeal on any of their other tunes. The closest they came was with 1973's Star, which stalled out at number 29 in the US. Steelers Wheel officially broke up in 1975 before the release of their third album, Right or Wrong. Egan and Rafferty pursued solo careers after Steelers Wheel ended. Of them, Rafferty found the most success, specifically with his 1978 solo album, City to City. Powered by the huge hit Baker Street, the LP sold more than 1 million copies in the US and more than 5 million across the globe. Rafferty would go on to release 10 solo albums before liver failure as a result of years of alcoholism led to his death in 2011. Egan contributed to Rafferty's 1992 LP On a Wing and a Prayer, but stayed out of the public eye. He was reportedly living a quiet life in Paisley, Scotland. 2. Starland Vocal Band. Starland Vocal Band had a brief burst of fame with Afternoon Delight, but they failed to follow up on their success, leading to a swift decline. Songwriting duo Bill Danoff and Taffy Nevert were married in 1972, shortly after their song Take Me Home Country Roads became a hit for John Denver. The couple recruited John Carroll and Margot Chapman to complete the Starland Vocal Band. They scored a number 1 with their debut single, Afternoon Delight, in 1976. The group suddenly won 2 Grammys, including Best New Artist, where they beat out Boston among others, and briefly even had a TV variety show. Interest waned, however, after they were unable to produce another hit song. Starland Vocal Band split in 1981, and Carroll and Chapman divorced. Danoff and Nevert would soon follow suit. Danoff continued songwriting after Starland Vocal Band, including several further collaborations with Denver before he died in 1997. Carroll carved out a long career as a songwriter and musician, penning the 1982 hit Get Closer for Linda Ronstadt and regularly working with country singer Mary Chapin Carpenter. 1. Journey. Journey's struggles with Steve Perry and their transition to a tribute act have marred their legacy. Their success is overshadowed by their difficult history and reputation. Journey is on our list because of the way they treated Steve Perry. If you disrespect one of the greatest rock singers of all time and turn one of America's most successful bands into a tribute act, you deserve to be on a list of crappy bands. That, and Journey can be a little white trash at times. They are one of the biggest rock bands of all time, and their most famous song is the best-selling digital track from the 20th century. But for Journey, global stardom might never have happened if not for a hard-hitting ultimatum from the record company back in 1977. As the band's original drummer Ainsley Dunbar recalled, we were told, "Get a singer, get some hit songs, or you're off the label." Everything changed when Steve Perry joined the band after they'd tried out another singer, Robert Fleischman. With a richly expressive voice, Perry could hit high notes that other singers could only dream of. His first album with the band, 1978's Infinity, reinvented Journey as a mainstream rock act. The album promptly went platinum, and from there, the only way was up. In the 80s, Journey became one of the biggest bands in America with the holy trinity of AOR albums: Escape, Frontiers, and Raised on Radio. Perry also had a huge hit in 1984 with his first solo album, Street Talk. But the pressures of fame led Perry to quit the band in 1987, leaving Journey on hiatus until his return in 1995. And when he quit again 2 years later, he was gone for good. How to replace the irreplaceable? Journey survived by finding the best Steve Perry impersonators on the planet. Journey has had 4 lead singers, but Steve Perry is the only one casual fans can name. Thanks for joining us on this musical journey through the worst of the 70s. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and check out our other videos for more fascinating stories from music's golden era. See you next time.